been here now at Milagro, the government national referral hospital, for a 24-hour shift. I'm at hour 18. So far we have had a total of 16 cesarean sections, totals of 23 for the day. The majority have been live babies. We've had 3 stillborns and 1 mother pass away.
Fast forward 2 months. It was September 5th, 2013, and I was on my way home from Uganda, on my way back to Canada. I was in Heathrow Airport, and I had a 16-hour layover. So I decided with 16 hours, I had enough time to go downtown and have a coffee on the Thames. So I joined the hordes of people on the underground, which I learned was called the Tube. And at first, I didn't have a seat. So I stood there, holding onto the bar, and I realized for the first time that I was back in what we call the developed world. And with that realization, I decided, I thought about a lot of things. I reflected for one of the first times since leaving Uganda. And as people started leaving the Tube, I was alone in the Tube, and I had a seat. And I really started to reflect on all my experiences and all the things that I'd done. And sitting there, I kept getting these announcements coming on, from the underground, mind the gap, she would say as the doors open, and mind the gap again when the doors closed, and continuously as we went along downtown. And I thought to myself, mind the gap. It's this 20-centimeter little gap. Surely everybody can lift their feet and their luggage and get over it. Do we really need to say it that many times? And I was just annoyed because it kept taking me away from my own thoughts. And as I was thinking about, mind the gap, what does that mean? I thought about the gap that I was going to have to mind when I came back home to Canada. The gap between Canada and Uganda. When I talked to my family and friends, what was I going to tell them? This is a story, this is what I did, and then what? What did my experience really mean? And I thought back on the first time I was on my way to Uganda, and I had my backpack on, and all the Canadian flags on your backpack, and you have a bounce in your step, and I was going to change the world, 4 months, and the whole world was going to look differently than it did right now, just because of the work I was doing. But sitting there in that Tube, I realized that the only world I really changed was my own. I realized that if there was a gap that I could mind, I needed to find it and mind it. And thinking about when these changes started to occur, I kept going back to the same story. This is the story of Alice. So I was working in the clinic, and I was handing out anti-malaria medication and testing for HIV and checking blood pressures for mothers that were going to give birth in the next few months. And one of the midwives came rushing in, and she's like, "Christina, we need your help in the delivery room." Well, obviously, there was an emergency going on, but at this point, I hadn't yet been to the delivery room. I hadn't seen a live birth. And I was a little nervous, but obviously, I needed to go there, and she gave me a pair of gloves. This is a very valuable commodity in the hospital. So I put them on with great care, and I walked in, and closer that I got, the more blood that I began to see, and the more nervous I became. I realized in that moment that if I didn't focus on something, that I was going to pass out. Somehow in that time, I felt as if I had a bit of an out-of-body experience. I was no longer standing where I was standing. I was looking up from above, and I could see myself standing there, shaking like mad. And I was watching all the midwives around Alice. And we're going around, but she's losing so much blood. And where's the bag of blood that's supposed to be, replenishing her fluids? And, there's no donated bag. Where's the heart monitors to monitor to see what her heart is looking like? If we're losing her, or what we need to do. As health workers, we were completely helpless. The only thing we had was our will, so we stood there willing her to live. Alice died that day. And when I came back to my body and I realized what had just happened, I watched as the light left her eyes. That was the moment that I felt the power of the human soul. Back in my body, I needed to get some space. I went for a walk, and I just walked around the health center, and I became less and less numb to my feelings and let them kind of overpower me a bit. And I took this picture. This is Alice's husband and daughter. And they were waiting for her to welcome their new member of their family, into their family, and their mother back to their home. And at this moment, seeing this picture and seeing this, I got really, really, really angry. I was standing there and thinking, I know all there is to know about public health and maternal death. I've been helping to teach a master's in public health leadership at the university, and I was teaching women about maternal health and maternal death. And I knew all the statistics. I knew that 16 women died every day in Uganda. I knew compared to Canada, 16 women die a year. That's 16 a day in Uganda, 16 a year in Canada. I knew all of these things. I knew there were 3 main delays that killed mothers. I knew that the first was the delay in the decision to seek care. The second was the delay in transport to care. And the third, the delay in the hospital itself, like we saw with Alice. I knew all of these things, but I was no longer okay with just knowing. I needed to ask why and understand what was happening. This is also the moment where I felt that Uganda had completely broken my heart. But then again, somehow put it back together in a way that felt as if it was out of order in the first place. I now had the perfect dichotomy between my mind and my heart, between my knowledge and my understanding. This was the moment I realized I needed to mind the gap that I saw. So in the beginning of my talk, you saw the video of 24-hour shift. We delivered 76 babies in that time. And I went home and went for a nap, and I came back to the clinic, smaller clinic, in the evening for the evening shift. And usually there's a couple of midwives, but we have a lot of births at this time. So I went to help out, and we had 4 mothers that were set to deliver. And one of them we found had a bit of a complication, and we needed to give her an emergency cesarean section. So we were getting all the materials we needed and collecting them all to bring her to the other room. And the midwife started to leave the room. And I was following him, and he's like, no, Christina, you need to stay here. And I thought to myself and said out loud, no, I can't do that. I haven't done that before. I just watch. And he said, it's okay, Christina. If you weren't here, no one would be. So you're better than nothing. And with those words, he left me with 3 delivering mothers and 5 pairs of gloves. So I took a moment to contemplate what I had to do here and get the confidence that I needed to help these women. And I started to assess them. So the first woman was in the corner, and she was going to be her 8th child. So she was about 8 centimeters dilated, so I figured, we have some time, at least an hour. And I moved on to the other 2 women, and they were first-time mothers. And this was going to be their first child. And that usually has a little bit more complications associated with that, more difficulties. So I started helping them to push, and I put 1 glove on for this mother and 1 glove on for this mother. So I was helping her push and going over here and helping her push. And then if I turned directions, I made sure that my gloves didn't get disoriented. And I was, of course, rationing the 5 gloves I was given. And as I'm working over here, I see the mother in the corner, and she's pushing really hard, and I see that she's crowning, and I can see the baby's head. And I rush over, I rip off the gloves, put on a new pair just in time to help guide the new baby out. And I'm holding this new perfect little soul in my hands, and I'm completely flabbergasted. It was a euphoric moment for me. And as I was holding him in my arms, I thought, who created this mechanism? How did this little human just come out of another? It completely floored me, and I just watched the whole thing occur. And then I realized I still had these other 2 mothers I had to help, so I quickly went to grab the scissors. But we didn't have any clean scissors. So I asked the mother, did you bring anything to cut the cord? And she had brought a small razor blade with her. So I used that to cut the cord. And wrap up the baby, and went on to the next two. And with these other two, it's a little bit more difficult. There's what they call an episiotomy, which is a vaginal cut to help get the baby out. And you're supposed to use the different pair of scissors for the mother and for the child. But again, we didn't have any scissors, and again, these women had each brought one blade. So I used the same blade to cut the mother as I did the child. And it's not what you're supposed to do. You could be causing an infectious disease to be carried. And as much as I knew that was wrong, I didn't have any other choice. And after I delivered all of the mothers, the midwife came back in, and he said, "So, how'd it go?" And I raised my hands and showed him that there are now 7 people in the room. And I felt really proud. But then again, I was still wondering, I still had that conflicting feeling, and the lights went out, as they often do in the evenings, and we were looking for the kerosene light, and I was holding up my flashlight so that he could see in the room. And I said, how does it feel to know that as much as you're helping, you could also be hindering someone's life? And he said, "We have to believe that what we're doing is good, or else our work is futile, and it's nothing more than what a slave would do." And with those words, I thought, this is something we can do. The whole time I was delivering, I didn't have a supply cabinet to go to grab new supplies. I had to give care and ration materials at the same time. This was a gap that I could mine. This was something I could do. I just didn't know how. How? Coming back from Uganda, I had delivered over 200 babies and watched over 20 people pass away. This was the gap that I needed to mind. Imagine right now if we were all born in somewhere else in the world. If I was a Ugandan mother, at 24, I would have at least 2 children. Would I have survived both of those births? And better yet, would our mothers be here to support us throughout our life? Our brothers, our sisters? These were the questions that I was asking. We are so, so lucky being where we are today. Here we are among like-minded individuals, wanting to change the world and wanting to make our ideas happen. We have all the tools we need. Everything is in front of us to be the best that we can be. But then again, how do I fix this? I'm just a student. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a midwife. I don't have any political ties that I can pull. I have nothing. I'm just a student. But then again, what kind of student am I? I'm a University of Waterloo student. Ideas start here. Luckily for us, when I came back to the University of Waterloo, I joined St. Paul's Greenhouse. And it's an incubator program, and I was in the right environment to cultivate the ideas that I needed to find a solution. And the solution was social enterprise. The idea came in the form of medical delivery kits. We had gloves, scissors, forceps, needle holders, everything you need to deliver properly for a birth properly. It became a social enterprise thanks to my friends, mentors, and my soulmate, Haider Hassan. Haider listened to me day and night talk about all of the mothers of Uganda and the gaps that we needed to mind. It was his idea to go in to become a social enterprise. He helped to bring us out of our comfort zones long enough to let the real world transform our minds and our hearts to social enterprise. With his business knowledge and vision, we co-founded Full Soul Canada. This is Haider, by the way. Full Soul Enterprise Canada. Full Soul is a social enterprise that generates profit to sustain both the organization as well as the social impact that we want to see in the world. So work with me here for a second. How many shirts do you have in your closet? I have at least 45. And imagine if each one of those shirts had a profit that was going towards something else in the world, to bring changes to society somewhere else, like places like Uganda. This summer, Full Soul Canada is going to be launching its first line of Canadian-made luxury shirts and apparel to provide funding for medical delivery kits in global societies such as Uganda. With social enterprise, you have a win-win-win culture. We have win for the consumer, who's getting a great luxury product with the added benefit of a social impact. We have a win for the social entrepreneur who's going to be bringing economic profit to his company, and win for the end beneficiary, in our case, Ugandan mothers and children who are going to be minding the delivery gap a little safer. Full Soul apparel will be sold for good, an understated elegance with social impact at its core. Before I go, I want to teach you one Ugandan word. So at the count of 3, I need everybody to say Sindika. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, Sindika. So Sindika is a word that you'd hear yelled, whispered, and screamed throughout hallways in hospitals in Uganda. Sindika means push. I found that when I was helping a mother to deliver, if I held onto her legs and watched as the contraction moved up her rib cage, I would yell 1, 2, 3, Sindika, and we would both push together. I want to encourage each and every one of you to Sindika. Sindika yourselves to ask why when you take in knowledge, and most importantly, Sindika yourselves to find the gap that you see in your world. Thank you.